Kansas. I'm Deb Goodrich.
And I'm Michelle Martin.
Right behind me is one of my favorite places in all of Kansas, and certainly one of my most favorite when I lived in Topeka, and that is Ward Meade Park, old Prairie town at Ward Meade now. And the site is such an incredible, special gathering place for so many Topekans. Wheat Fest is held there now, and I have hosted Wheat Fest. My alter ego Dixie Lee Jackson has hosted Wheat Fest, and um, I've emceed the Apple Festival there, done ghost tours there, done just about every kind of event you can think of, and it was all just such a joy. And I really, really miss it. So Michelle has a real special connection with this place too that she's going to share with you.
Well, behind me, if you are not familiar with the Bloody Benders, you will be after this segment today. And my connection between the Bloody Benders and Ward Meade Park and Old Prairie Town is that I had the opportunity to work with KTWU and their amazing production Sunflower Journeys. And we actually filmed an episode about the Bloody Benders there. And as a matter of fact, I've also filmed an episode of Sunflower Journeys about the Potawatomi Creek Massacre there in Topeka, because the structures they have there are such fantastic locations for filming. So it has been adapted to take on many Kansas historical event personas over the years.
It has, and the cabin, the reconstruction of Anthony and Mary Jane Ward's cabin, which is on the property. My dear and longtime friend Brad Davenport actually built that cabin. So Brad was the photographer many years ago when I did the book Stories in Stone on historic Topeka Cemetery. So the circle just keeps going round and round and round and round, but it always comes back to Ward Meade because that's a lot of where Topeka started. You know, Anthony and Mary Jane Ward
Hmm.
bought land there and established a wheelwright shop. Anthony was a wheelwright, and Mary Jane is affectionately known as the mother of Topeka. She kept a candle burning in her little cabin window at night so that travelers on the Oregon Trail could find their way. And conveniently, she would feed them, and Anthony would make sure their wheels were ready for the long trip westward. So it's just a lot of our origin story for Topeka and for Kansas goes back to this spot. So it's really special.
Well, Deb, it sounds like the travelers who visited the Mary Jane there in Topeka had a much better experience than some of those who visited the family we're going to talk about, who settled in Lebec County in the early 1870s, the Bloody Benders. Uh, they definitely had a little more than providing a meal, a bed, and some shelter and some groceries to their guests, because there are several 13 that we know of, possibly more individuals who made their way to the Bender place, seeing that little light along the trail between Fort Scott and Independence, and hoping they were going to have a hot meal and a warm bed, and got a little more than they bargained for.
It's like comparing the Holiday Inn to the Bates Motel. That's sort of what.
Exactly. It really is. Definitely. But I'm sure that when people arrived at the Bender place, when they saw beautiful Katie Bender, as a matter of fact, our good friend Dave Zerfus has a song about Katie Bender. He says, beautiful Katie, the men can't agree. Your hair, if it's auburn, or a dark raven's wing. You hold discourse with spirits and dance with the boys, all at your family's lonely outpost. And, she was beautiful and beguiling, and she probably was that face that lured them in. And then, unfortunately, when they had dinner at the table, they didn't realize that death waited behind the curtain in the form of Father and Brother Bender, who then whacked people on the heads with a sledgehammer or a hammer of some kind. And then it is said possibly that Katie Bender herself would pick up the knife and finish people off. And so you heard no screams in the night from the Bender place.
Yeah, that's it really is a horror story in the making, and of course, the Benders operated kind of under the radar for a long time until then. What happened, Michelle? It always comes out this way. You get the wrong person,
That's right.
and that's when
Well,
the cover is blown.
well, yeah, and actually it has connections to my adopted Kansas hometown, Fort Scott. And of course, a gentleman by the name of Dr. York, whose brother was Colonel York and was stationed at Fort Scott. Dr. York was heading off to Independence. And when Dr. York did not arrive in Independence and his brother had not heard from him, his brother went ahead and started making inquiries and actually saddled up his horse and took off and actually made his way to the Bender place because he knew there were places along the Fort Scott to Independence Road. And when he arrived, he inquired about his brother and was given an answer that well, yes, he was here. We fed him. He stayed. He went on his way. We don't know anything about him. But the moral of the story, folks, is this: if you decide you want to be a serial killer on the prairies of Kansas in the 19th century, and you're going to kill people and rob them, don't have their belongings setting out in plain sight in your little home. And it was seeing his brother's saddle that gave it away. And Colonel York, being a very astute individual, went ahead and acted as if the Bender answers placated him. He then went into Independence and then went back to Fort Scott and brought a posse of men. And we had men from Independence and Cherryvale and Fort Scott converge on the Bender place, only to find that the Benders had vanished into the prairie. And so then, of course, they started exhuming. They started digging in the orchard, digging under the house, digging all over, and that's when the bodies started showing up.
So I was just telling Michelle, we were talking about this before we started filming, when I lived at Topeka Cemetery, and all roads do lead to Topeka Cemetery for better or worse eventually. Like my friend Andy Waskey in Philadelphia, everybody in the world has a connection to Laurel Hill Cemetery. That's the way it is with me in Topeka Cemetery. But Topeka Cemetery has five governors buried there, and two of them are connected to the Bender case. That would be
Hmm.
Osborne and Anthony. And they're buried just a few feet from each other on basically on top of the hill. They'll give you a map, and there's also one at the gate when you
Hmm.
go. Um, and they're buried close to the circle at the top of the hill in the old part of the cemetery. But both governors had a connection to the case. Governor Osborne is the one that issued the reward. But as we were talking, there were four governors
Hmm.
of Kansas whose time actually is spent on addressing the issue of the Benders.
Yeah, we start. Governor Harvey is in office when they begin killing. Governor Osborne is in office when they flee, and he's there, of course, issuing different kinds of rewards and offers for their return to Kansas. And then Governors Anthony and St. John are also involved, and actually, the Kansas Historical Society. There's quite a bit of correspondence from Governor St. John regarding the Benders. And to me, I think what is amazing about the Benders story is the fact that there's so many theories about what happened to them. After they flee, there are some who maintain the posse caught up with them, dispatched with them, and dumped their bodies. There are others who say no, they got away because there are individuals who were brought back to Kansas during the time periods of the last, especially those last three governors, and purported to be the Benders. But when going through cross examination, it's discovered all the individuals brought back are not the Benders.
And in the
Um,
correspondence with the governors, a lot of that, and it's just like modern day crimes, like I'm addicted to forensic files, and a lot of these things, and Michelle, has worked with Bill Curtis, who, uh, what is it, cold case files, and
mhm,
so a lot of these cases just now, just like then, people are calling in, mailing in, writing all kinds of crazy
mhm,
reports. They think they see them everywhere. So a lot of those governors' correspondence are just that. People are writing to say, "Hey, I'm in Colorado, and the Benders just moved in next door. I'm in Iowa, and I just saw the Benders get off a
mhm.
train, and wherever they were everywhere. They were just everywhere." And which
Yeah,
you follow up on, and you can imagine how hard that is now, and it was exponentially more difficult
yes.
in the 18th century.
Well, and it was, and I actually personally I subscribe to the theory. I really do think they got away because it was so much easier in the 19th century to go ahead and change your name.
Yeah,
You didn't really have to alter your appearance a whole lot because if there were no known photographs of you, then you didn't have to
right,
worry about that.
yeah,
You could go ahead and change your name very easily. It's not like they could put in your social security number and your birth date and do a background check really quick. So it was a little bit easier to fudge your identity in the 19th century. And what's fascinating is in the course of researching the Benders, I came across a newspaper article from the Los Angeles Times well into the early 20th century where a gentleman says that his elderly neighbor, an elderly woman who lived next door to him, who has died, confessed to being Kate Bender. That she had been ill and she expected she was going to die, and she confessed to him that she was the notorious Kate Bender and that the crimes were her idea and hers alone, and that she pulled her family along with her, and that she wanted to clear her conscience. But then the irony of the situation was the fact she recovered from that illness and lived another couple of years. And so
uh-oh,
now you have this poor neighbor thinking, oh my, I know this woman's deepest, darkest secret. And is she going to come over and is she going to go ahead and do me in the middle of the night? But we even get Bender sightings supposedly after they've left, papers in and around Fredonia and other communities in Southeast Kansas. You get these newspaper articles that show up, and there are Kate Bender sightings in Kansas. And in one case, it said that she bought a small home and that she'd gone into a hardware store and bought up every hammer that they had in the hardware store. So sometimes the press of the 19th century definitely can't be trusted, but oh, is it so fun to read it and wonder?
Michelle, where did the Benders come from? Where did they come from to Kansas?
Well, there's a lot of debate as to that as well. Ma and Pa Bender were said to be, they had come from Germany,
Mhm.
and because they spoke very little English. And it is said that they actually had spent time in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois before coming to Kansas. And actually, there are a set of murders in Allegan County, Michigan that are possibly linked to the Benders. They've never been able to prove that conclusively, but so there may have been other warm up crime sprees before they came to Kansas and hatched their full plan. So it's really interesting because the historical documentation is so difficult to find on them and to really authenticate. So
Sure, yeah.
it's real fascinating.
It is a fascinating story, and crime fascinates us, and the historic and unsolved crimes are just Jack the Ripper. I mean, those things that are
Hmm.
never quite figured out are the most fascinating. Those mysteries that just keep going. And thank goodness, wherever they went, the Benders are safely dead now. So
Yeah.
it makes discussing them and considering the possibilities a little more palatable, to think that they can't hurt anybody anymore. But man, you talk about terrorizing uh,
Yes.
the Midwest and beyond, uh,
Mhm.
in the in that era. Yeah, that story went viral. That it really
Yes,
finding a bunch of graves, um, wasn't that common. It wasn't like you had a serial killer every day like we do now on TV.
right.
It just those stories just weren't
Exactly.
common. So, yeah, it was a huge news story, and again, it's one of those stories. When talking about Kansas, I'm like, nearly every iconic event of that we associate with the West, the American West, either occurred in Kansas or has a really strong Kansas connection. And I
Yes.
dare say that 80% of them occurred in Kansas. And the Benders is one of those. And
Yes.
we were just the crossroads, we were just everybody
Right.
here. And
Well,
good or
and
bad.
the Bender story, it just didn't make news here in the United States. I actually bought, because I just had to have one. I found an original Harper's Weekly from June 1873 where the Bender story was covered, and one full page above and below the fold with illustrations. And when I saw that available at a newspaper auction online, I bought it to add to my Kansas collection. And but the Bender story is covered nationwide. It gets coverage in Canada, and it gets coverage in the UK and France during this time period. So it is not just a Kansas or American mystery. It goes viral in the 19th century, and it's international in scope. And it's interesting.
So
The
let's talk
English.
a couple of minutes, Michelle,
Mhm.
before we go about the case KTWU's production
Oh
of the
yeah.
Benders, and you worked with some dear friends of ours on this, and that I know is still available. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I had the good fortune when I was living in Kansas and Oklahoma to work with the fine folks at KTWU at Washburn, Jim Kelly and Scott Williams and Dave Kendall and their entire crew for Sunflower Journeys. And we actually went ahead and did filming in multiple locations in Kansas. We actually went out and walked the area where the Benders were said to have lived, did some filming there, and then we went to Ward Meade there to Prairie Town, and used the cabin and filmed the Benders inviting someone in for dinner, and our victim was our good friend Tim Ruiz. And so, but then we had to go ahead and film and talk about how Kate went into the town of Cherryvale and passed out handbills that discussed her services as a spiritualist medium and red palms. And we pressed Scott Williams, KTWU producer and cameraman extraordinaire, into service as my palm reading victim. And so we filmed there, right in front of, I believe, what was the Potwin drugstore, I believe, right there in the park. And um, it was great fun. And actually, KTWU won a regional Emmy for that particular segment out of Sunflower Journeys, and we had a great time filming that. And we lost Scott this past weekend. Scott fought a valiant and courageous and dignified battle against cancer, and his loss is so felt by so many. And we wanted to send our love to his husband, James, but to all of our mutual good friends at KTWU who have known and worked with Scott and loved him for so long. Um, Deb and I were joking. I found out, I read it on Facebook, like I read a lot of things these days. And now Facebook's broken. And I said, Facebook's broken because so many people are so devastated at Scott's loss, because he was a beautiful, kind, compassionate, and talented human being that gave much to Kansas. So, Scott, we love you and we will miss you.
He was such a sweet soul. I got to share this one real quick. when I had a radio show in Topeka, and of course I, had known Scott and I'm trying to think who came that day, if it was um, Bill Schaefer and Scott, or if it was Jim Kelly and Scott. But I had my good friends Brian Welch and Hank Will from Ogden Publications, Mother Earth News, and I had Scott and one of his buddies from KTWU on my radio show the same day. Well, Brian and Hank come in with all this swag from Ogden Publications. And I mean, there's like the tote bag and the mug and all this junk, and it was really cool. And I'm such a sucker for, bribes. And so they bring all this stuff in, and here comes Scott and gosh, I wish I could remember if it was Jim that day. I mean, we know all these guys so well, but what
Yeah.
stands out is I remember Scott's face when I said that. I said, "Hey, look what the guys from Ogden brought me. Where's your stuff?" And they're just Scott's face was like, "We didn't bring her anything." And so the next time he brought me stuff. It was so funny. It was just so precious. But oh my God, Scott will be so, so missed. And yeah, sending our love out to everybody that loved Scott. We'll be right back.
1821, a trade route was opened from Missouri in the United States across prairies and mountains to Mexico. In 2021, we will mark 200 years of epic conflicts and grand adventures, larger-than-life personalities, and sweeping landscapes. Join us on an historic journey. The Santa Fe Trail lives on.
Find us on social media or santafetrail.org. Welcome to the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in my hometown of Oakley, Kansas. We're the front door of Western Kansas, located on 3 main highways, I-70, US 83, and US 40. And all those roads lead to history, beautiful scenery, and adventure, no matter which direction you go. We now have an IHOP. That brand that you've trusted up and down the road in all your travels is staffed with local folks, real people just like you and me, and we're waiting on you to join us. So for fun, adventure, fuel up, fuel your body, and let's have some fun.
Kansas, and behind me is the extensive ground of the Santa Fe Trail Center at Larned, Kansas, right there on the highway. The Santa Fe Trail Association actually rents office space here. The association does not own this. This is owned by the County Historical Society, actually, and it is a wonderful museum. And there's several buildings that help interpret the history of the plains. And it's just a fantastic site to visit. So not too far from Fort Larned. So you can hit both those sites when you're down around that area, and go out to the cemetery. While we're talking about cemeteries in October, they've got a really cool cemetery, and the corner of the cemetery actually has Santa Fe Trail ruts in it. And there are ruts not far from this location. I think they can tell you how to get there from the museum. They've got a great gift shop. I've spent many, many dollars in that gift shop. So it's and we're going to talk about a new exhibit they've got, which is a good reason to stop by now. So Michelle, where are you today?
You know, Deb, I am in the heart of the Flint Hills. I am at one of my favorite places in Kansas, the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve, that is administered by the National Park Service and the Nature Conservancy at Strong City. And This ties into the exhibit you're going to talk about, because when we talk about home on the range, where deer and antelope play, we can't forget the bison. And this is where you can actually see bison. They have a herd of bison there. I do not recommend getting up close and personal. I've had my own up close and far too personal experience with bison, and had to call for a ranger to come evacuate me from the hiking trail. That's another story for another time. But this is where you can actually see them in their natural habitat.
There are a lot of places where you can safely view the buffalo. Maxwell Wildlife Refuge, which is again not too terribly far from Larned. And then there are private herds around the state that will offer some type of tour, a lot of times in the fall. And they have, private, like our good friend Ken Clem up at Goodland, has buffalo hunt packages there and a beautiful lodge where you can stay. So some of those around too. So check that out. But we're real fortunate here in Oakley, just south on the highway here. The Duff Ranch has a buffalo herd, and there is also an overlook. So you can stop many days. I'll tell you what, some of the most incredible scenes I have ever witnessed were right there. I was driving up from Garden City one day, and there was a wall cloud behind, just there on the distant horizon, and the sun was going down and kind of backlighting this, and the buffalo herd was in front of it, and it was breathtaking. And I'm like, oh my God, millions and billions of people have lived on this earth and never seen anything like this moment. It was so incredible. I never get tired of watching them. I just never get tired. Sometimes Noelle and I'll take the kids and we'll go some of the back roads there by Duff's, close to where the herds are, and just be on one of the dirt roads and just stop there at the car and just watch them lumber along or roll in the wallow, or whatever they're doing. And of course, at Fort Hays, right across from Fort Hays State Historic Site, the Fort Hays State herd is right there. And I don't know, there may be with calves now, maybe a dozen or so, but any given time, there are always people stopping there at the park to watch those. And there is a white buffalo in that group, so that makes it, or a brown buffalo. A light brown buffalo is probably more accurate because it's pretty dirty. But anyway, the buffalo, the bison, has such, is inseparable from the story of the plains. And the Santa Fe Trail Center has a new exhibit, Bison, Master of the Plains, and that is through October 25th. And the new director out there, Seth MacFarlane, who is just a great guy, used to work at the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe. So he's got a lot of really neat connections. And Seth is really excited about this exhibit. So I hope you can stop by and see that. Tell Seth that Deb and Michelle sent you out, and maybe he'll give you a free wooden nickel or something for that. But staff there works really hard. They've got some new exhibits. If you haven't been in a while, they've worked real hard on really updating things. So it's very, very nice. And again, the kids can get out and walk around the exhibits. Good place for them to run off some energy and learn a little history too. So the buffalo. Once these beasts roamed the Great Plains from horizon to horizon. If the Plains tribes attempted to count them, there is no record. There were enough, more than enough, to supply food, lodging, utensils, sport. When white trappers, soldiers, and freighters arrived, the numbers were staggering, but exactly how many is that, and what did it take to diminish those numbers? We are still guesstimating. Some have asserted that there were so many bison roaming the Great Plains, and their demise occurred over such a short time, that hunting could not have possibly wiped out that many animals. Historian Rod Beamer disagrees and has the research to back up his findings. Zoologists say the plains could have supported 28 to 30 million buffalo. Some historians have said upwards of 60 million may have lived here. While we can never know for certain, the Army likes numbers, real numbers. So General Phil Sheridan put his observation skills to the test. Traveling from Fort Supply, now in Oklahoma, to Fort Dodge, he and his party observed a great herd extending 100 miles in width. They had no idea how long it was. They were estimating that it numbered in the billions of animals. More conservatively, they decided it was 250,000. The demand for buffalo hides created a hunting spree that continued through the mid-1800s and very nearly left the animal extinct. The hides had so many uses, but the greatest number went to industry. They were used as belts to run the great manufacturing machines then dominating America's Northeast. Buffalo also fed the railroad workers, and this is where Bill Cody's hunting skills provided him with a handy living. Sheridan, on the other hand, was pushing for its slaughter, seeing it as an effective means of subduing the warring Plains tribes. One observer remarked, "It is estimated that there are, south of the Arkansas and west of Wichita, from 1 to 2,000 men shooting buffalo for their hides alone. Among those men seeking their fortunes hunting buffalo were Old West legends Bat and Ed Masterson and Wyatt Earp." Rod said the Kansas Pacific line from Kansas City to Denver was completed in 1870. These rails cut right through the heart of the big Central Plains buffalo pasture. The Santa Fe reached the Kansas-Colorado line in 1873. This facilitated the movement of supplies and hides to and from the hunters working in the southern herd. Though Rod documents disease and other natural factors, it was, in fact, the hunting of the buffalo that resulted in their numbers tumbling from the millions to near extinction by 1900. Conservationists took up the cause, and the animals' numbers have increased steadily since that time, though they will never again approach the numbers that Plains tribes would have witnessed in the early 1800s.
Howdy, I'm Seth Hayes, and welcome to my hometown, from then to now. Council Grove has a rich history as deep as the prairie tall grass. Spend the day visiting 25 historic sites or explore the unique shops and restaurants, or mosey out of town along the Santa Fe Trail. You all visit my hometown, Council Grove, in the heart of the Flint Hills.
Okay, looks like it's time for our tour. Welcome to the Fort Wallace Museum. Here at the museum, you're going to find some really interesting stuff like our replica stagecoach from the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. We've got facades from the fort buildings. We've got an 1870s flag. There's a plesiosaur that was discovered locally. We've got the Ray pump organ collection. We're a little bitty place with a great big story, and we'd love to have you.
Welcome back, and we can't talk about having fun without a cemetery. So behind me is the Davis Memorial in Hiawatha, which I have to say, when I moved to Kansas, is one of the first sites I checked off of my list. And that is one that our friend Roxy Yankee has included in her new book, 100 Things to Do in Kansas Before You Die. So before you get a nice tomb like this, she's got a lot of other ideas for you. And another place that is included in her 100 places to go or visit or experience is right there behind Michelle. And this may be one you can experience over and over and over again as you're traveling through Kansas.
Yes, Deb, this is the public restroom facility in Lucas, Kansas, the capital of Kansas folk art, and I would argue the folk art capital of the Central Plains. You notice over my left shoulder of the world, over my left shoulder, you see a concrete roll of toilet paper. That was in short supply not too long ago. And so the concrete swishes down to form the sidewalk that leads you to the toilet. And they are the most ornate, decorative, and intriguing public toilets I have ever seen.
It really is incredible. And of course, Lucas, the whole folk art theme started with that incredible tomb that Mr. Dinsmore
Dinsmore,
himself there, the Garden of Eden.
Garden of
And
Eden.
when our friends, I've got to give a shout out to our friends, Andy and Carol Waskey in Philadelphia. We did a tour of the West with them. God, it's been 10 years ago or more now. But we went to Little Bighorn. We went to the Devil's Tower. We did all kinds of stuff. Do you know what the most memorable part of that trip was? Lucas, Kansas,
Lucas.
and the Garden of Eden. Yeah, she was blown away. Of course, you know, we all were historians. We love dead people. But yeah, it started with Dinsmore's crazy ideas. They're just nuts. But God, it's fascinating.
It is. And what I think is amazing about it is one man's very unique vision about art that started in his yard and kind of morphed into even his own burial, his pyramid structure that he's buried in. And folks, if you go there, if you take the little ones, or if you're squeamish about dead bodies, you can see him under glass there, folks. So be warned. But it starts with that. But what's amazing is how the town embraced it. And it is the entire community. Everywhere you drive, there is folk art, hence the folk art public toilet with the concrete toilet paper there for you. You and I visited here together. We were on our way to Denver to the Order of Indian Wars Denver event. And it was fantastic because we had such a great time just getting off the highway and going up to Lucas. It was absolutely wonderful. I actually still have my Garden of Eden coffee mug and then my Garden of Eden bag. I had to buy a book bag. I mean, can you not? I mean, we can't go to any kind of house museum or museum of any kind without buying something in the gift shop. And so, of course, I had to purchase. But that's what Roxy wants you to do. She wants you to get out and see places like Lucas, see places like that amazing Davis Memorial behind Deb. Get out there and explore Kansas and spend time in these smaller communities and see these amazing things that people come up with.
And there's just no end. And we've got a couple of things coming up. Again, I want to remind people to come here and visit Oakley. The Cornhusking Championship is coming up. That's the weekend of the 16th. And the Nebraska Cornhuskers got nothing on us. You know, we and Nebraskans come down here to compete. So this is really, and it's a great time to just come to our area. You can visit the Buffalo Bill Cultural Center and see that magnificent sculpture of Buffalo Bill forever running down the buffalo. It's just an incredible sculpture by our friend Charlie Norton. And then you can go down to Monument Rocks and go down to Little Jerusalem, and you can just get your
go over to Fort Wallace.
Fort Wallace to just see the countryside around here. It's pretty incredible. Go over to Colby to the Prairie Museum. It's phenomenal. So much to do here. So come and visit us in Oakley. Stop at Mittens and get gas and IHOP and yeah, so just come and see us. And then October 19th at the Barton County Historical Society in Great Bend, Dr. Leo Oliva is going to be speaking on commemorating the 200th anniversary of the Santa Fe Trail, a trail of commerce, conquest, and cultural diversity. So anytime Leo speaks, you should take advantage of hearing him if you have the opportunity, because it's always entertaining and it's always a pretty incredible insight into the past. So there are some things coming up. 100 things to do in Kansas before you die would make a great stocking stuffer.
Yeah.
Christmas time is coming. And we put a plug in for our books. I know that our Forts and Bases in Kansas that Michelle and I put together, using a lot of Leo's work as reference material, is still available. You can order that on Amazon or contact one of us and we can arrange to sign it for you. But that's kind of a good little guidebook on different parts of
Mm-hmm.
the state as well. And then my Civil War in Kansas. And Michelle, you got a couple of others that are still out there too.
Yeah, actually, I'll take our folks down into Northeast Oklahoma a little bit with my work on Woolaroc, the lodge, wildlife preserve and museum started by Frank Phillips, the oil magnate of Phillips 66. So Woolaroc, Images of America, is available. And also, I took a look at when I moved to Bartlesville and became a resident of Washington County, Oklahoma. I did a book called Washington County Then and Now, where I looked at the historic photographs and then went out to the same locations and replicated them in the modern day. And so I was able to show people how much has changed or stayed the same historically in our communities. And also, if you're lucky, if you like food, you can still find copies of the Prairie Table Cookbook that I co-authored with native Kansan Bill Curtis. What a way to get your first publication in the book world by working with Bill Curtis. So that was great fun. So those all make great gifts, and we have so many friends who have amazing books.
Yes,
I think we need to start putting together a Kansas gift guide for folks on our Facebook page, so we can start sending you to get these amazing things, but also to go visit some of these great places in Kansas.
that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do that. We can give you ideas for gift baskets, and especially when you're ordering for people, your friends and relatives that are not close by, and you order things online and have sent to them. A lot of Kansas expats out there who
Mm-hmm.
would love some of these books or memorabilia of some kind. So yeah, we'll start passing along those ideas. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today. We hope you're having a lovely October. We will see you again next week. In the meantime, I'm Deb Goodrich,
And I'm Michelle Martin,
and we will see you somewhere around
round
Kansas.
Kansas.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.